original.
And I'm in love with the money.
Hello, hello, hello. Today we are talking about family planning, the ins and outs. And I have Keachea Dixon joining me to help me carry on this conversation to make sure that all our bases are covered. Keachea Dixon is a licensed attorney in across jurisdictions. She's licensed in New York, in Canada, Ontario, as well as in Jamaica. She has a specialty that spans commercial law, entertainment, cannabis, real estate, wills and estates, intellectual property, and technology. She has basically 20 years of experience that she'll be bringing into this conversation. So listen in, take notes. If you're on live, feel free to ask questions in the comments. So Keachea, I gave a brief intro as about your practice. Could you tell us more?
Well, I think you covered it. I don't like to talk a lot about myself, but I guess what I would say about my practice is that it's very important to me that each client understands what they're doing. So it's not just about writing something down or jotting down exactly what they say, but it's also about getting from them what their goals are, right? So if it's a family situation in terms of a wills and estate situation, how do they envision life for their family when they're not here, or even when they're here? How do they envision their life if they have a disability or something of that nature? So my practice takes a holistic approach to every client, be it a commercial matter. So where do you plan to see your business in 5-10 years? And then taking all the different areas of law that affect whatever matter they brought to me, right? And at the end of the day, they should be able to share with their business partner or their personal partner what I have shared with them and understand it. So the key for me is not just about giving you the document you have asked for, but you must understand your document. It must be personal with you, that you are not second guessing after you have left my office. What did she say again? Or how does that really apply? No. When you leave, you should know what you have done and know if you need to make changes at a later date, and so forth.
Yes, and I'm glad that you said that, because listeners, do not take this as personalized legal or financial advice. Contact us individually if you'd want to dive more into the topics that we'll cover. So you know what? Let's dive right into it. We are talking about an individual journey, right? We go through life, our responsibilities change, our goals change, as you mentioned, and our obligation change. And alongside that, our legal matters need to be addressed differently, and our financial goals will change, and the products that suit us will change over time. So Keachea, from your perspective, what do you think would be the key components of a solid financial and estate plan?
Okay, so I am not the financial guru or the insurance guru, but from a holistic perspective, they always tell us from we're younger that you must start saving, right? I have found in life that different things happen. You save, you have a whole lot, and then something happens and that may be taken away from you for whatever reason.
Yeah.
Or you may squander it because you're in your early 20s and you figure, I need to have life, I need to travel around the world, etc. Right? But it is important to do that little saving. And if you're going to take away from it, make sure you leave some behind, because whatever you leave behind is compounded, right? From a legal perspective, right? Individuals would say, what do I really have to think about legally, right? Well, anything can happen to a young person, right? So once you're of age, definitely 18, right, that you can sign off on things for yourself, it's important to think about things like a power of attorney, right? Because at that stage, your parents can't even go into a doctor's office with you. Actually, even before 18,
16,
right?
eh?
Exactly, right? They can't go into a doctor's office with you, much less if you have your own bank account, which you would. most people do at that time, right? They probably even took off their parents who started the bank account with them, for them at 4 or 5, right? Or even before, right? So they have no access to do anything from you if you haven't put certain legal things in place. So, what am I talking about? I'm talking about the power of attorney, right? The power
Mm-hmm.
of attorney for your property and the power of attorney over your personal life. So, what concerns your health, right? And what you'd want to do there, you can put restrictions. So, it's not like you're giving them a field day over whatever they can do if you're incapacitated for some period
Mm-hmm.
of time, right? But you can actually tailor make your power of attorney that it addresses your concerns about whoever you give that authority to. You can also dictate when it starts, right? Is it a
Mm-hmm.
continuous power of attorney, or is it one that will only start triggered by, for instance, a doctor stating that at this moment you cannot do anything for yourself. So therefore, this
Mm-hmm.
person now can either, without a doctor's note or with a doctor's note hand in hand, go in and make decisions for you, both as it relates to your health and your finances, right? Or your real estate. If you already have real estate at that time, all of that would fall under property, right? Based on the restrictions that you put in those documents. So you could say, for instance, um, they can, as it relates to your health, you don't want to take vaccinations or something like that. So yes, they can make decisions, but you don't want to take. I had a situation where at the time, because this is before, of course, they didn't want to get the COVID shot. So it was
Mm-hmm.
designated in there that whoever had their power of attorney could not make a decision to give them a COVID shot, right? So you can
Okay.
fine tune the documents to address the concerns that you as an individual have. But, Cardine, what I would like to hear from you is, what are the insurance side of things that can protect them alongside with the legal?
Most definitely. And just to clarify, do we need one power of attorney to address both the property matters and the health matters, or are they
So
two
they're
separate
individual.
documents?
So they're two separate documents.
Okay. Yes, and as you mentioned, like our journey changes and things happen during our lifetime that can financially incapacitate us if we're not prepared, whether it be an illness, whether it be an injury, or it could be just sending a child to college, right? All of these things can be financially impactful, right? Sending a kid to college now, it's at 20,000 per year. A critical illness might put us out of employment for months or years, right? So we
Mhm.
need to be able to have protection or safety nets in place to take care of these instances. And what is available? Again, insurance is a safety net, right? It's there to help you in the instance of an event happening. We have car insurance because we want, if we meet in an accident, we know that the expense is covered. Similarly, when you're looking about your life, you need to have life insurance. If you have dependents, whether it be kids or parents, have that in place, right? Because it's better, as you said, to leave something behind so it's compounded. But the number one person that we do take care of is ourselves, right? So when you take out a critical illness policy or a disability policy, you are putting that safeguard in place for yourself, that you know that you have the financial resources, whether it be to access medical care or just to pay your bills. You have those resources that you're not stuck in a financially stressful and limiting situation, right? So I've mentioned a few things right there. So if you have any other questions, what do you
Well,
think?
I was just wondering, like, when is the right time to get these insurances, right? Is there a age, requirement to get insurance?
Well, there is not necessarily an age requirement that as you get to this age, you should get a life insurance, right? I have insurance policies for my kids. They don't own it, right? Because they're minors, but I do, right? When you become 18, you can, just like with signing a legal document, you're
Mhm.
empowered to do so. At that point, you're also empowered to sign on an insurance contract. right? So from the age of 18, you can personally take out life insurance, critical illness, disability on yourself, right? So
But can you
again,
take
if what
those
your
out
goals.
on can you take those out on your children? And when, meaning in terms of the critical, um, the disability, etc. And at what age can you do so? Like, do they have to be
So for a
one?
life in,
Should they be, a couple weeks? Do you know?
So for a life insurance policy, normally if the child is 15 years and older, you can have a policy on that life. And the good thing to most providers, especially with a life insurance or critical illness, they might add child riders onto it. So it doesn't necessarily have to be a separate policy. When you take out yours, you might have the opportunity to add a rider on for your kids, right? It's less likely, but life happens. You never know what will pop up, that they can get ill. They will get ill at that age. But as we age, we know that these things do crop up in our lives. So you can use the life insurance policy for your kids even as an investment tool. So again, it comes back to what your goals are, what you want to achieve, at what point you do certain things.
Okay. I was just
So,
thinking, my mother actually got insurance on me just before I went off to university, and that was key.
mm,
I think it would be good if she had done it earlier, but it was good because at that time, oftentimes people don't have any health issues yet, right?
mhm,
So the longer you wait to get insurance, based on my lessons, with our family, you run the risk of not getting good insurance or the best
yes,
insurance you can, because you
yeah,
have developed some of the, like hypertension, for instance, is a simple thing that you can develop earlier than you think you can, just based on
yeah.
stress factors and the way you live. So I just want to add into what Cardine is saying, that it's important to look at these things, right, at the age that you can get it, because as you get older and certain things develop, it will be too late to get covered for those things. Yeah.
Yes, exactly. And so far, you've mentioned a power of attorney that addresses your health, gives directions in regards to your health or your property if you are incapacitated. Would that be the only document you'd need to incorporate in an estate plan?
No. So, of course, as your family grows, or even as a single person, because oftentimes people say, I don't have anything, or I'm single, etc. Um, I don't need to have all these different documents. So the other document I would recommend is actually the will, right? So yes, the life insurance would provide for your family or friends, depending on how your family look like, right?
Mm,
Or rather looks like, um, when you pass on. But if you don't have, and it would go based on you writing who the beneficiary is, right, Cardine? That's how it works, right?
mm. Yes.
So, but with the will, anything else other than these insurances that you would have signed up for, it will be distributed based on the law, unless you have designated how they should go within a will. So that would be the other document that I recommend.
Okay. So basically, if you want your intentions to be carried out at the time of passing in regards to your estate, get a will. So you can dictate who gets what, when and where,
Exactly.
right? And ensure too that it's not held up um, in an extended probate period just because you did not have that document in place, right?
That's correct. Because if you don't have the will, and you do have assets, or if you had a bank account with a certain substantial sum, the bank would request either way, right, that you get probate, right? So if you have a will, at least it would say where everything is to go or who it's to go to. If you don't have a will, then a family member would be the one, or, normally they go based on who is closest to you based on family. So if you really wanted a
Yeah.
friend, that friend would not be able to just apply for probate without a will as easy if there is like a husband or a child or other people in line before them who have a right to apply for probate without a will, right?
Okay.
So yeah.
So what's the difference between a will and a power of attorney?
So the power of attorney exists while you're alive. Once you pass
Mm.
on, then the will comes in effect and the power of attorney is no longer valid.
Okay. All right. So what
Mhm.
else would be included in the will? Is it just talking about who gets what? What if you have kids? How does that play into a will?
Right. So if you have kids or even pets, right? I've had to draft will that talk about who would take care of your children. So you would state that in there. You would state details as to, say, for instance, you had a home, right? You could write a trust inside the will that talks about the fact that depending again on your estate, right, the value of your estate and what the estate can do, that the guardian, right, would ensure that either they live in the same home if that's important to you, right? Again,
Mm-hmm.
depending on the age of the children. Suppose the person you select as a guardian doesn't have a home. So there's a lot of, you know, fine tuning for each family based on their circumstances as to what they would put into the will regarding the care of their children if they were to pass on before they became adults, right?
Yes. And
As it
again,
relates to um, any pets, you would say a caretaker, or if you want to give the pet away, after you pass, you can also deal with disbursements as it relates to charity, right? So if your
mhm,
family is small and or you really want to leave a lot for charitable organizations that you gave to while you were alive, you can put all of that in the will as well.
there you go. But I always say, right, because you spoke about the care of your kids, the care of pets, and alongside passing, there are certain things that happen. Once you pass, all your debts become due, all your assets are deemed disposed of, but the bills continue to come for your family. So alongside having a will and the power of attorney, I encourage individuals to have a life insurance policy because the debts, the taxes, all of these need to be paid. And if you have family that you've left behind, kids, you want to ensure that they have money to survive on, to make sure food, clothing, and shelter that's taken care of. Their educational needs are also taken care of. So in my mind, a will is great, but it needs to be empowered with life insurance, right? So people have the wherewithal to do that. And even the fees associated with executing a will be costly and would need to be covered. Is that right?
Yes. The fees for the will range based on if it's a simple will, right? Versus, a more complex document in the estate planning.
Mhm.
Also, individuals have chosen, again, depending on how they look at things, to even just go to a Staples and pick up a package, right? But then there are dangers in that depending on your own understanding, right? So
Mhm.
you have to self evaluate where you're at in terms of your knowledge and um, where you're at in terms of financially, not meaning to afford, right? But meaning what your estate looks like, what's your portfolio, right? Because
Yes.
just picking up a will and writing it in there and you have more than, you know, just a bank account with $1,000 or something like that, you're running a risk based on if you don't have the proper understanding of the terms, right? There's
Mhm.
always someone that is willing to work with you as well, meaning some attorney, or also there are different places that can offer, like they may have a drive or, different specials where they will do a will for you, right? And they have the knowledge for it. So if you're not in a position to afford the lawyer in your area, don't give up, right? Don't say you can't do this or put it off. It's better you have something written down than nothing at all. Um, a question I have for you, Cardine. Okay, so the question is, when someone is purchasing a home, right? There's always that section where they
Mhm.
can decide if they want to take insurance on the home, right? And it says that it will pay for the house,
Mhm.
etc. My question is that
Yeah.
enough, or does someone need to have, because people ask those questions, right? Is that enough, or do they need life insurance on top of that?
Well, that is just the bank offering them insurance, right? And if most times, if you realize they never ask you a question, that is called post-claim underwritten insurance. So if something happens, that's the time that they consider whether or not you qualify. So that's a risk in itself. Plus, when you get that type of insurance, it says it's covering the mortgage, so it's actually covering the bank's interest. As you pay down the mortgage, the payout on that type of coverage decreases, but your cost does not. And if the mortgage is paid off, you have no coverage. So that's not really for your benefit. So instead, I'd actually advise individuals to go out and apply for your own personal insurance, right? And that way, you know that you qualify because you'd have been underwritten, and the benefit is as per your stipulation. It's actually for your interest. So you can have it that it pays off the mortgage, but it also sends your kids to college as well, right? So again, know what you're getting into. It's not always the best option. Usually it's not for you, it's for the bank, right? So it's protecting their interest, not necessarily yours. So go and get your own. That's my little piece of
Okay.
advice.
So, can you use insurance as an investment or retirement tool,
Yes,
planning tool? Okay. How would you do that?
yes. The insurance industry is one of our tax shelters, right? When you have a permanent policy that allows you to build cash value inside of that policy, the growth inside of that policy is tax exempt, right? So, depending on the type of policy, whether it be a whole life policy or a universal life policy, you have a measure of control, right? And you have different opportunities for growth inside of that policy. A whole life policy is usually managed by the insurance company. They determine what portion of your fund goes into asset classes, what the asset classes are. You basically have no view of it, right? And they determine what the return might be if that policy even carries a return. With the universal life policy, also a permanent policy, you get to choose the underlying investments in that policy based on your risk appetite. And you also get so you're self-directing, right? And you'll experience market returns. So whether the market is great, awesome, but sometimes the markets can not be as good, right? You might have positive returns and also negative returns. So with that policy, you bear the risk of the market performance. While with a whole life policy, if you're not aggressive and you're conservative, you'd like the guarantees of never a negative return, right? But you'll have basically average return. It's more like an inflation buffer in my mind when you invest in a whole life policy. Um, if you're looking for returns. So it depends on where you are, what your goals are, but you can definitely use your policy to fund future expenses. For example, you can leverage it for funding your kids' college education because you have the opportunity to use it for policy loans, right? You could use it to fund your retirement, right? Because you have the opportunity for collateral loans as well as withdrawals, right? The tax implication for each differs, but again, this is something that you can explore with your advisor, right?
Hmm.
Every person is at a
This is
different
all
place
new to me.
financially.
This is all new to me in terms of leveraging for the loans. I
Yeah,
heard
you
of
can
it.
do that.
Yeah, I've heard of it being done in the US a lot, but I just, because Canada is so different with everything, I just didn't even think about it from the Canadian perspective. So Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah. For example, self-employed persons, small business owners who might not have anything else going for their retirement might consider including an insurance product with cash value buildup to help supplement their retirement income because one, it grows tax exempt and there are different ways to access the funds, including tax efficient methods, right? So it's definitely, in my mind, an important part of any financial plan both from a short, medium term and a long term perspective.
Okay.
So back to the will. Do you need one will? Does one will cover it all, or do you need more than one?
So for the average person, one will is sufficient. Um, However, if you have a business or if there are things that can be kept outside of probate, right, you can have a secondary will, right? Or sometimes we call it a business will. So in that will, you would put, for instance, if you owned a company, you would put the company in that will. So it doesn't have to go through probate. That will would just be read, and um, the desires of the testator, which is the person who drafts the will, meaning the person who is going to pass on, um, it would state who they want, for instance, to get the shares of their business or who is to operate the business. If you have certain assets, right, such as, you know, um, jewelry, stuff like that, it can be put in a secondary will and it won't have to go to probate because probate is, um, it's costly, right? The legal fees is not as cheap as people would think. It's like ranging from 2,000 and up, again, depending on what your estate looks like. Then you have to pay probate tax, right? That goes to the Minister of Finance, and that has a particular calculation on it. But just as an example, estate that is valued um, almost 600,000 after encumbrances and stuff have been removed from it. Encumbrances meaning like a mortgage, etc. Their bill to the Minister of Finance would be uh, near to $9,000, right? Approximately. So
Yeah. And in some
you
instances,
can
it's a percentage of the estate value.
exactly. So when you're looking to leave as much as you can to the beneficiaries, these are things that you can look into to see if some items that you have can fall under the secondary and kept out of probate, and you only have to deal with the value of the items that need to be probated.
Okay. And
Mhm.
we said this before, our life changes, our obligation changes, our responsibilities change, right? And that is a reason why I typically do at least an annual review with my clients because the life events happen. Some get married, some have kids, some they've finished paying for their kids college education, so their needs have changed. And we do have to touch base in order to ensure that these needs are adequately met with their insurance coverage. Is it a similar thing for a will and a power of attorney?
So generally, the lawyers don't check in, right? In terms of, or the average attorney would not be checking in with the client to see if they needed any changes, right? Because oftentimes the way the will is drafted, for the most part, a lot of things um, would have been taken care of. However, in our reporting letter, we would state to the client that, as you said, if certain life changes occur, that they should contact us, right, to review and see if the will needs to be changed. So, as you said, if something like, say, the person who did the will initially wasn't married, right? So now they're about to get married. So they need to update their will in an instance like that, right?
or
Or
vice
if
versa.
exactly, correct. Or if
Mm-hmm.
you had children and you provided for them in a particular way, now they're adults and you have thought of things differently as to how you want certain things to be dealt with, that would call for another update of the will. You did the will 20, 25 years ago, and life has changed a lot. The way you think of things, have changed. You have acquired more and you want to distribute it in a different manner. That also would be a trigger for you to update your will. And some people, they'll ask, oh, well, can I not just do a codicil, right? A codicil is not good for big changes, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's good if you're just changing like one clause, a sentence or two in a clause or something like that. But when you have multiple things that needs to be changed within the will,
Mm-hmm.
it's best to just redo a new will.
Okay. And another thing that popped to mind, right? Because a lot of us are immigrants. We have some family some family where we're from too. We handle, for example, the executor role in a will? Should we say use a relative back home? What are the consequences? Or should we use a service here or somebody here? What kind of consideration should we bear in mind when choosing an executor, the person who will administer our will?
Okay, so that's a very good question because many people don't even think about it or consider it. And but it is, you know, important that an attorney mentions to the testator, the person who the will is being done for, that who you choose as the executor, or what we call also estate trustee, affects the administration of the will in terms of the taxes, right? So the
Mm-hmm.
estate will be taxed based on the persona of the executor, executrix, estate trustee, right? So if that person is not a Canadian citizen, right, they don't reside in Canada, then it will take on that where they reside and will be taxed accordingly. So it won't just
Okay.
be,
So,
yeah,
and
because
in
you
order
also
for
have
them
to
to
do
even,
like a final tax, right, for the person who passes on, right?
yes.
So it would take on the persona of the person who is in that position doing the taxes on their behalf.
Okay. Is there any like red tape that will basically make it a bit more challenging for somebody who is an executor to a will for a person who is a Canadian resident, but they are outside of the country?
Well, yes, there's also requirement, possibly they could require a bond, right?
Mm,
Which is you have to pay down something with the court, right? To ensure that things go well. Of course, when probate is finished, then you get back the funds, right? As well
mm,
as just logistically, right? It's not just about red tape in terms of um, legally, but it's just logistics as well. Like, how are they going to function? So I had a scenario where a client who would have been the immediate um, person to take on the role of executor, because the person passed on without a will, right?
mm,
So the individual would have been first in line to take on the position, but they lived outside of this country. Um, they weren't able to, they were older, they weren't able to use, Zoom and all that stuff um, efficiently, and they didn't have anyone to help them to do so, right? So they decided to allow another family member right, who
Mm-hmm.
is located here, to take on the role. Of course, I had to sign certain documents because, as I said, in terms of the inline portion, when you're doing it without a will, then the person who is going to be jumping others has to have all the people being jumped sign a document saying that they give up their rights to be
Mm-hmm.
the executor and give it over to this person, right?
Okay.
So all those things, again, if you don't put things in place in a will, causes what you can say is a red tape, but it isn't. It's just a process that now takes longer because you have to locate the person. Suppose you don't locate those individuals because you personally don't know where they reside, right? So
Mm-hmm.
it's best that people who live in Canada who don't have a lot of family here, if they have someone they trust, or also banks provide the service and other companies provide the service. I don't know like their what their fees are or anything like that, but they do charge administration fee to either do the probate and be the estate trustee for the estate. That would be something, of course, you put in place prior to um, the drafting of your will. So you would state it in the will who this person is. And I do
Mm-hmm.
know, I definitely believe, because I had a client that came in, and before BMO, for instance, was in charge of their estate, and then now they've
Mm-hmm.
made a different decision and created, but that was just their choice, right? It wasn't an efficient way, but that was, they had the option and it was their choice.
Yeah. So basically, from the conversation we've had so far, we need to take a number of things into consideration when we're looking at our financial plan and as well as our estate plan, right? The types of assets that we have, who are our dependents, what will be our wishes, and taxes, right? Ease of administration. All of these things need to be considered when building out your financial plan. We mentioned a few things. How soon should you take out a will, a power of attorney, and insurance, right? And again, your needs change over time as your family changes, as your life changes, as your values change. Everything impacts some of these decisions. We even mentioned retirement, right? And Keisha, I don't know if
Mhm.
you've ever looked into it, but this is a significant chunk of time for most people. And unfortunately, a lot of people are not prepared for it, or they had stuff happen in their life that kind of wiped them out, right? So we talked about using your life insurance policy alongside the other financial tools that we have available to us in Canada to build out those financial plans and your estate plans, and also putting those safeguards in place that protects your assets and protects your income, right? The
Mhm.
critical illness, the disability insurances, just to make sure that if something happens, you are prepared and you can survive it without losing your shirt, so to speak, right?
Mhm. Or
So,
even losing your house, because I was just speaking to a colleague the other day and they were just really stressed because, like myself, they're very empathetic to their clients, and they have this
mhm,
scenario where you know there is um a retiree who is sick with cancer in their home. um the home, with all these interest rates and everything going on, they're facing a potential, you know, power of sale, but they want to pass on in their house, all these different things to consider. But because individuals may not have certain knowledge or access to information, right? They don't know the options out there that they can use if they start to see certain things coming into their life, right? So,
mhm,
for instance, one option that they could have thought of before things got that bad is to do like a reverse mortgage, right? Which, depending on the equity, a lot of people don't like it because, in terms of, they think people will be taken advantage of, right? But
mhm,
you have to look at it with the proper guidance, right? and what your family plan is, right?
Yes.
And see if for the care of you, the retiree, right? And whatever other access you have in terms of funds, if you don't have that much, etc. And it's
Hmm.
important to you that you stay in the home, that might be an option, for you, so that
Yes.
you don't worry about where you're going to live when you're also critically ill, right? But
Yes.
my final question for you regarding the critical illness, and um, if you are diagnosed with cancer, right? Is there life after that, meaning in terms of insurance coverage?
Yes, there is life after that, right? Whether it be for life insurance or critical illness coverage. The thing though, it's not money that buys insurance, it is health, right? At some point you might get to the place where you just can't buy insurance because you're not healthy. Nobody will insure you, so that's why it's important to get this before you have these instances pop up in your life. But if you've had them pop up, there are some providers who will offer you a policy with certain exclusions, right? Because they do have to manage their risk, so they'll probably have exclusions. Or for example, you might have certain things that you maybe have a family history of and you just want to protect yourself against those instances. You could do that as well, right? So you have life insurance that is guaranteed issue. So regardless of your medical history, you can get a guaranteed issue policy. But again, these will cost more because of the risk that the insurance company is taking on, right? And there are various factors that impact what your insurance cost will be: your age, your gender, your smoker status, and your health, right? And in my mind, that's why I encourage young folks to look into insurance for the multifaceted tool that it is. It provides you with protection, it provides you with a tax shelter, it's a financial tool that you can incorporate into your retirement planning, right? And if you look at this when you're early on in life, you'll benefit from the lower cost, right? And you could have it all paid up before you get to the place where you really need it, right? Because the older you get, as you just explained, that's when you need insurance most. And
Mhm.
unfortunately, a lot of people, as I said, they didn't get into the details of their insurance options and find out at a certain age when they really need the benefit, they can't qualify anymore or even afford it if they qualify. So I'm glad that we're having this conversation because all the tools that we're talking about, um, when you need it, it's just too late, right?
That's
So
right.
we need to have these things in play for us um, early, and we need to revisit them as our lives change. So, are there any common mistakes or omissions that people might um, do in their lifetime that we want to alert them to? I know you mentioned once you're able to sign on your own behalf as an adult, get a power of attorney. So if you get ill or incapacitated, you have somebody who can speak on your behalf. So that's one. I'll tell my 20-plus-year-old daughter to get one. Know that I know that, right? And what else? What other tips would you give our listeners to ensure that they have these things in place so their lives can go easier?
Well, I mean, if I know everybody noticed that when we were in COVID, the people who were getting a lot of work were the wills and estates individuals, because people were nervous, they were concerned that they were going to pass on, right? The reality
Mhm.
is no one knows their time, right? So you don't want to delay and leave your family in a flux, right? To know what to do. The next thing is, by the time someone looks at a will, they have already probably done all the planning and all this type of stuff. So you want to write some of the important things down, right? And give it, either keep
Mhm.
it in a safe and let your trusted person know how to get into that safe at that time.
Yes.
But you need to let them
Mhm.
know where the important documents are, Because yes, you did a will, but you didn't. So you said mistakes. People have a will, but nobody knows, or they don't know where it is, right? So
Mm-hmm.
here the person passes, they did do a will, but nobody could find it, right? So you definitely
Mm-hmm.
need that trusted family member or a friend to know where to access it when the time comes. Same for the power of attorney, right? As it relates to your desires, again, by the time people look to a will, they probably already planned your funeral and all this stuff. And I know we don't like to talk about these things, especially as West Indians, right? I'm from Jamaica, full disclosure. We don't like to talk about it, right? But the bottom line is taxes and death guaranteed, unfortunately, especially with the taxes. So, but it's something that you need to write the information down as to how you would like to um, have your going away event, right? Um, any other thing that they need to know that's important, where things are, write it down, share it with them, talk to them about certain things. We also don't like to talk about it. Talk to them, let them know what your desires are. Fine.
Similarly to your will, you need to know where your insurance documents are and allow somebody else privileges to those documents. So if something happens to you, they know where to find it. Have a binder where all your accounts are listed so they know where those things are as well. And we have to ensure that we're taking care of the people we leave behind, right? And having been organized is definitely one way to do that.
Mm-hmm.
So thank you so much for joining me. We've touched on a number of things, and I'm hoping that our viewers got the conversation. I know that we were having connectivity issues because of internet connection and coverage, but I'm hoping that they got a good handle on what they need to do to ensure that their finances are taken care of as they progress through life's journey, and that they have sufficient documents in place to ensure that their wishes are taken care of in life and after passing as well. So thank you so much for your time, Keachea. Do you want to
You're
share
welcome.
with our viewers how they can get in touch with you?
Right. So the easiest way to get in touch with me is by email. So you can send me an email. It's scrolling at the bottom there, but it's kdixon at lawofficeofkdixon.com. And you can call my office at 289-291-7652 or my cell at 647-637-8612.
And then can reach me at 647-951-6905 or at info@moneymattersca.com. Reach out in our DMs. Also, Keachea, can they find you on social media at all?
Yes, I'm on LinkedIn. I'm on Instagram, but I prefer LinkedIn personally.
Okay. All right. So, you know what? We've provided you with some information to jumpstart your financial and estate planning. Get to work. Again, these things are things you want to have in place before you need them. The earlier, the better. Thank you so much for listening. And Keachea, thank you so much for joining.
You're welcome. Have a good day.